It is 6:30 p.m. and I would like to call the City of Pleasant Hill Planning Commission meeting to order for Tuesday, March 25th. Please stand with us as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Chiang,
Here.
Commissioner Colfin,
Here.
Commissioner Mascaro,
Here.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Here.
Commissioner Weber,
Here.
Commissioner Weiler, and Chair Field.
Here. Okay, and may I have the staff introductions, please?
Certainly. Seated to my right is Haley Crowfoot, myself, Troy Fujimoto from the Planning Division. To my left is Leticia Galeazzi. Leticia Galeazzi, right? Okay, thank you. And then from our Public Works group, and then Shannon DeFrosia from Planning across from me.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to open the floor for public comment. The public is welcome at this time to address the Planning Commission on any item, with the exception of items scheduled for the public hearing later today. Do we have any cards or would anybody like to address in public comment?
No cards.
Okay, thank you. Then I will close public comment. Moving on to the minutes. We have been given the minutes for the last meeting to review. Would anybody like to make a motion on the previous minutes?
I'll move approval of the Planning Commission minutes of February 25th, 2025.
I will second.
May I have a vote, please?
Commissioner Chiang,
Yes.
Commissioner Colfin, Commissioner Mascaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Chair Field.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I would now like to move on to the public hearing portion, which would bring us to ENT 2024-0035, the Taco Bell Architectural Review Permit and Permit for a Major Sign Adjustment. Do we have a staff presentation?
Yes, thank you. All right, so the project before you tonight is for the Taco Bell restaurant at 1700 Contra Costa Boulevard. This is for site improvements and new signage. So the specific project request requires an architectural review permit for a building color change with their updating branding. There's an artwork feature as part of that and new landscaping throughout the site. There's also a sign permit, which is for 3 new canopy mounted signs, 2 wall mounted logo signs, and then monument sign replacement and some new directional signs. The signage, as proposed, does require a major sign adjustment, which is a use permit, to exceed the total wall sign area, the total number of freestanding signs, and the total sign face area of freestanding signs. So a little background, the ARC previously approved the existing building colors, a new signage and landscaping in February of 2010. As part of that, in June of 2010, the Planning Commission also allowed an increase in sign area for the site to not exceed 44 square feet. And that would be distributed along the west and south elevations, where 39 square feet is permitted by code. The ARC reviewed this project just at their last meeting in March and did recommend the Planning Commission approve the application, but had some considerations. Excuse me, that the project would include painting the clearance bar support column to match the approved exterior building colors. That's on the drive-through. It's a clearance bar for the drive-through component. And that they remove the north-facing edge sign, which is, there's currently no sign on that north area. And if by removing that north sign, it therefore drops the total sign area proposed away from a major sign adjustment to a minor sign adjustment, and it's also consistent with what was previously approved for square footage. And then finally, there's some ancillary text on the primary monument sign that would read either breakfast, drive-through, delivery, or go mobile, and the ARC requested that that be eliminated. And so the applicant actually supported all of these requests, and they've been included as conditions of approval.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So we'll now kind of dive into the site. Here's an existing site plan on Contra Costa Boulevard. There is, as I mentioned, a drive-through component, and the building sits at the north end of the site with a parking area on the south. Here's some existing colors, which is the former Taco Bell branding. As I mentioned, they're proposing a rebranding. And so here is what's being proposed. So it's going from more kind of warm tans and yellows to a series of gray colors with a purple accent element. And it would be on all elevations that would be repainted. Here's just that artwork feature that I mentioned. It is a kind of abstract artwork element. It does contain an abstract logo, Bell logo, and some colors that are part of the branding, but the ARC felt that it was abstract enough not to count as signage and considered it an artwork feature. They're also doing landscape proposal or improvements, as I mentioned. And so here's an aerial of the site again. And really what the applicant is proposing is to actually restore the landscape back to what was approved in 2010. As you can see, there's several areas of the site that don't contain landscaping where landscaping was approved. And so they're looking just to replant in those areas and bring it back to what it was supposed to be when it was approved. And so those are really in these areas highlighted here. And the plants would be consistent with what is already on site. So that's it for the architecture review permit. I'll move on to the wall signs. Here are some images of what's being proposed. And so the top elevation and the kind of middle row elevation, you'll see the Taco Bell letters with the Bell logo on top. And then that bottom, which is the north elevation facing the drive-through, where they're originally were proposing that Taco Bell logo, or excuse me, Taco Bell letters. That is the elevation that the Architecture Review Commission proposed to remove signage from. It's not visible from an adjacent street or the parking lot. And so the applicant was agreeable to that. And so with that elimination, and then the signage would just remain on the two top elevations. And then as I said, it would require a minor sign adjustment. And so I think I should have put this slide up earlier, but here's the justification for that. And I will just mention that it would bring it to 44 square feet, which is consistent with what was already approved. Move on to the monument signs. Here's the picture of the existing monument sign. They're going to reface it with their new branding. This image shows the ancillary text that I mentioned. All of that, per the ARC's recommendation, would be eliminated. And again, the applicant was agreeable to that, and we've already put a condition of approval in your proposal tonight. And then here is the existing freestanding clearance bar. The ARC requested that the applicant paint that kind of orangey yellow color and update it to match the new building colors. And there's some additional freestanding signage proposed around the site to facilitate both the drive-through and the pickup on site. And that's with their new branding. And a digital menu board, again, at the drive-through element. This is going to remain with no changes. So for discussion tonight, as part of the architecture review permit, it's really just the proposed color change for the building and the landscape plan. And then for the sign permit, as I mentioned, it does require a major sign adjustment, at least for the total number of freestanding signs, which is in excess of 4 of what's allowed on site. However, given the drive-through and the need for additional circulation, staff felt that if the planning commission was supportive, we can make the findings. And then that also leads into a adjustment for the total sign face area for all freestanding signs. And then the 2 elements that I brought up that the ARC requested, removing the secondary sign copy on that monument sign and then eliminating the wall sign on the north elevation. And so with that, staff recommends the planning commission review the proposed project, take public testimony, accept the CEQA exemption, and adopt the recommended resolution approving the use permit and architectural review permit and sign permit, subject to those findings and conditions of approval.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have questions for staff? I do have a question, just for clarity's sake. So based on what you've submitted, what staff has brought forth as a proposal, that's been reviewed at the applicant and the if I understand what you've said correctly, the applicant is okay with what's been put forward tonight.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And the applicant is also here. I'll mention.
Yes. Applicant, well. Do we have any other questions for staff before the applicant gets to give a presentation?
Yeah, through the chair, just, well, I actually have a question for applicants. I'll wait.
Okay. Okay, then I will close questions for staff and then would the applicant like to give a presentation?
Yeah.
Sure.
My name is Sandy, and I own a couple of Taco Bells here in Pleasant Hill. So as you know, from time to time, we're required to do these remodels, which is basically just a cosmetic thing. You paint it and just change the sign faces and all that. So it's a pretty standard stuff, but it's just taken too long to get this approval. So, but there's one thing that we wanted to bring to attention was the clearance bar and the pole. So that was done like about 20 years ago. And we don't have any problem painting it with the colors of the building. But, it's just, it takes a little extra time to do that. And, the current Taco Bell image has a very simple clearance bar, which is just a pole and a clearance bar on top with a shroud. And I think that would be a better alternative for that for a couple of reasons, that it won't make it too complicated to paint and do all that. And the second thing is that clearance bar with the pole on it was counted towards the square footage of freestanding signs because it had Taco Bell logos on it. And the new clearance bar, which is just a straight pole with a clearance bar on top, doesn't have any Taco Bell logos or any of that. So that'll reduce it. And if you, Haley, if you have a picture of that, if you can show that, that'll be great.
Yeah, give me a second.
Yes.
You see those bells on the left side and the clearance bar going around? So instead of that, I had proposed, I think I'd send an email with the pictures of that. I don't know whether you have that or not.
I don't have that picture, no.
All right. So it's just a straight, bar going up and a clearance bar on the side without any bells or any of that. So I think that'll be a simpler solution if it's possible to do that. That's all.
So you would remove,
We'll just remove this whole
Whole
big
thing.
structure from there.
I see.
Because it's got all these bells and all, which was counted towards the, so if
Right.
it's possible, we can do that otherwise.
So it sounds like what's happening is that what we've been presented with is really not what is being pictured in your mind, where it's getting a new clearance bar that's really just simply a post and a bar coming out. And then the actual clearance bar that would be for contact if the vehicle is too large would be reduced in terms of its what would be printed on it. It would not have any logos or anything. It would
Correct.
just have the text of you can't be this tall and go through the drive-through.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And then,
oh, go ahead. There's two structures up there. What's the one to the left? If I'm on the right-hand picture, what's that to the left?
that's it flipped the other way. So that's if you're looking at,
The other
Yeah.
perspective?
so this is looking at it front on, the other one's looking at it on the side.
I have more questions.
Okay.
So this is for you, but has this alternative structure been proposed and reviewed by staff?
No, I just, I wasn't here in the previous ARC meeting because I had a personal emergency.
Mhm.
So I just sent an email showing the alternative, if that is acceptable. If not, then we can just go and paint that.
Okay, Mr. Singh, the problem that I'm having
Mhm.
is that we're hearing a verbal description of this.
Right.
Neither the staff nor the commission actually have a drawing or a picture. So I'm struggling, and I think maybe the next question is to staff as to how we handle this, because I'm not comfortable approving something that we haven't even seen and that the staff has not had the chance to review.
So I can clarify, the applicant did send a photo. I apologize, I didn't realize it was something you were actually proposing to be included tonight. So I do have that. I can see if I can get a picture posted, but it is simply a pole with a clearance bar. So it, it would be acceptable. It would meet our standards, and it would not include sign area as well. So if you give me a minute, let me see if I can pull it up there.
Okay.
Okay.
I suppose what we could do then, and this is a question for staff, but Mr. Singh, we would have to do a little bit of a different, I guess we could add something into this approval, which would be that structure needs to be approved by staff. Is that the way you would want that handled, Haley?
Yeah, that's an option. That would work.
Okay, because we don't have anything in front of us, so I have no idea.
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable with it unless it's going to go through some kind of review. That's just me speaking.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Coughlin?
Yeah, just a really quick question, and I think you might have answered it. But is this a part of a rebranding on sort of the national scale or?
Yes.
Okay.
So from time to time, they have, when we have to do that rebranding, it's called, minor upgrade or successor upgrade. So then it matches with all the other Taco Bells during that time period. So
Okay.
it's mandated by that. Oh, here it is. Yeah, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, I have a question also, and this might be for staff. The post and the crossbar that's there now, is that considered signage with the bells on it?
Just because it has the bells on it. Yes.
So if that's taken away, does that give him more square footage to do with his signs?
Well, he already was, or the applicant was already requesting to exceed that sign area and to exceed the number of freestanding signs. So that those requests are still on the table. It does obviously reduce the amount of sign area, but it
Okay.
would still need the same approvals.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this side?
And I'm sorry, I know that this has already been addressed, but I'm not sure I'm clear about it. Has staff reviewed this and deemed this acceptable, or does that need to still occur?
No, he did send this email to staff and it would be acceptable. It was
Okay.
just my mistake for not realizing it, needed to be included tonight.
Okay, so we can just add an exception to the existing resolution that would allow for this change for the freestanding clearance bar,
Yeah, it could be added as a condition of approval.
a condition of approval. Okay, thank you.
I have one question. I'm not sure if it's for staff or for the applicant. So the major sign adjustment would be for 5 freestanding signs, which this replacement clearance bar would eliminate one of the freestanding signs?
Correct, but the site's only permitted currently 1 per site. So it would still exceed what's allowed in code.
Are you following this?
So I'm going to give
I had to
my
read it a
summary
couple times.
of the situation, and maybe this will be helpful, or if it's not, correct me, please, is that the applicant has provided us with a clearance bar here that is currently more elegant and has less signage than what's presently there. The condition that we're facing at the site, however, is that even if so using this solution that we have up on the screen, which is just the pole and clearance bar, that the conditions on site are such that even if this were used, it wouldn't alter any other signage allotments, because it is what we have there is still over. So if this were to be approved, we wouldn't be able to give more in another area, is my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But it is, I like the bar.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
So if we were to say that, then if we were to approve just what we've been provided by staff tonight, would that preclude the applicant from just doing that later and not having to alter the proposal that we've been given?
If,
My question is, how do we make it easier for the applicant is really where I'm going. So,
you mean if we had approved the original proposal tonight,
mhm.
and then, let's say 6 months from now, the applicant proposes this, what would
Yes.
be that process? That's an interesting question, because we would actually, it wouldn't be a sign permit because it's not new signage, potentially an architectural review permit for site modifications. One of the other things to consider is the footprint of that column is getting smaller. And
Mhm.
so if there's any sort of replacement, whether it's landscaping or mold, anything that needs to be dealt with, we
Mhm.
would also want to look at that. And
Okay.
so, it could be an architectural review permit later.
Okay, so there's still going to be a review.
Okay, let me just see if I understand this part of it. So, Haley, can you, write something, draft something that we can add to this approval that basically says, we're, the commission is approving in concept this design, but that it will need to go to staff for a final approval. And I think that makes it, in other words, Mr. Singh does not have to come back to either the ARC or the planning
Exactly.
commission. But we need some language that basically says this change of the bar is approved by the planning commission in concept.
Yeah, I can work on that.
Okay. Then while we're doing that, do we need to discuss? Thank you for your
Very
time.
much. Appreciate it.
So,
Thank you.
okay, moving on, I'll be closing the applicant's presentation and moving to opening the commission discussion. We've had some already, but is there any other commission discussion that we'd like on this matter?
Sure. So just a couple of thoughts. First off, thank you to the applicant for making the changes that ARC has requested. So appreciate that. It also sounds like we're trying to make this too difficult. I typically, I have an issue with things being changed sort of here if the public didn't have a chance to sort of see it. Although I think in this case, it doesn't really change the nature of what we're talking about or the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. Personally, I would be comfortable just approving this and figuring out if there are any issues, staff can address them. It seems like it's been sort of lingering out there based on what we heard. So I'd like to find a way to approve it if staff is comfortable with that versus approving what we have and then having the applicant come back and have another review. So I don't know if there's a path forward for that. To me, that sounds like a more efficient way to do this.
Well, to be clear, this approval by the planning commission still needs to go through a building permit process. So staff will see it again. So, I mean, Haley's crafting something up, but in concept, we could approve the support structure conceptually as we'll make some reference to what was submitted. And we'll say that's subject to final review and approval prior to building permit issuance, which has to happen anyway. So that's not an additional step.
So one of the things that I'm trying to do right now is stretch this time out so that Haley can get something crafted so that it doesn't have to come back.
Comments on the new color scheme. And by the way, I think that ARC did a good job on this permit. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be considered here in terms of the size of the signs and the design of the signs, the whole thing. And I think that they pretty much did the heavy lifting on this one.
I concur. I think that what was presented is pretty straightforward and makes sense. And I'm grateful that the applicant agreed with the adjustments that ARC suggested. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you. Makes it pretty clean.
All right, any other commission discussion items on this? Okay, how are we doing on the language?
So my recommendation would be to amend condition 1.2 on the proposed resolution, which is the condition speaking to the clearance bar in the column already,
Mhm.
and just actually add to it. So currently it reads, the project shall include painting the clearance bar support structure, in parentheses column, to match the approved exterior building color scheme. I would propose to add, or include an alternate design, eliminating the Bell logo and containing only a support pole, subject to staff review and approval prior to building permit issuance. Something to that effect.
I think that's good.
Sounds perfect.
Okay, so then just to be clear, if we add that language, then that clearance bar proposal will not come back here, but there will still be some other review processes it'll have to go through. But I think that's the best we can do here tonight. So then with that, and recognizing the change that Haley has added to what they proposed, would anybody like to make a motion on this item?
All right. I'll make a motion approving an architectural review permit, use permit for a major sign adjustment and sign permit, including a minor sign adjustment, ENT 2024-0035 for the Taco Bell color change and sign improvement project at 1700 Contra Costa Boulevard. Amending condition 1.2 to include an alternate design subject to staff approval. I simplified that a little bit.
I'll second that.
Thank you. May I have a vote, please?
Commissioner Chiang,
Yes.
Commissioner Colvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Mascaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Chair Field.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right. I would like to move to the next item in the hearing then. This would be 7.2 ENT 2024-0013 Downtown Master Sign Program. Do we have a staff presentation?
All right, thank you. So the second item tonight is a proposed master sign program for downtown Pleasant Hill. Here's just some site context. I'm assuming everyone's aware of downtown Pleasant Hill, but this master sign program would encompass the entire downtown area. And it would replace the existing master sign program. And it includes all permitted sign locations, sign types, sign dimensions, everything needed for all new tenant and identification signs for downtown. So the entitlements that are required based on the proposal are a sign permit for the master sign program, but also a use permit for a major sign adjustment to allow an increase in the maximum allowable sign area per tenant, and also to increase the allowable sign area on the parking garage.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt, Haley? But we realized that we didn't open public comment on the last item.
I apologize.
So if we can hold off on this and
We're going to hold
reopen.
off on this.
So we would,
That was
since
my
final
error.
action was taken, we'll need someone to reconsider it and then we can reopen it if the majority agree.
Would anybody like to provide a motion to reconsider item 7.1?
I'll make a motion to reconsider.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
May I have a vote?
Commissioner Chiang,
Yes.
Commissioner Colvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Mascaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Chair Field.
Yes. My apologies. I would like to open public comment for item 7.1 relative to the Taco Bell sign.
Public.
There is no public comment, but this is your chance. Anyone? Okay, I will close public comment. And then what's the process from there?
You would just do the same motion. Second, we'll revote on it again.
Okay, so then we
Simple as
will,
that.
may I have a motion to revote?
All right, I'll make a motion approving an architectural review permit, use permit for a major sign adjustment and a sign permit including a minor sign adjustment, ENT 2024-0035 for the Taco Bell color change and sign improvement project at 1700 Contra Costa Boulevard. Amending condition 1.2 to include an alternate design subject to staff approval.
Second that.
All right, may I have a vote?
Commissioner Chiang,
Yes.
Commissioner Colvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Mascaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Chair Field.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay,
No, it's fine.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay. And so going back to Downtown Master Sign Program, some background for the site and the history. The original Master Sign Program was approved in 1998. It was then amended in 2003 to include parking garage entry signs, some directional signs, directory map, and other various parking lot related signage. And then the current tenant design guidelines for downtown were adopted in 2010. And then in 2020, the MSP was then amended again for new tenant signage on the existing parking garage, which you'll now see installed today. And so the ARC did review the proposal, and I have included an attachment of all of their comments as part of the application tonight. So I'll highlight just a few here, and then I'll go into more detail as we get into the proposal. But they did request language clarifying that tenants could not combine sign area for multiple elevations to add, put a larger sign on one elevation. That was included as a change from the applicant. They also requested a consistent horizontal center line height requirement. This will get more clear when I get to that page, but for all rear facing signs to ensure consistency on the elevation. For end cap tenants, which are corner tenants, the ARC requested language that any third wall sign be brought back to the ARC for review and approval to avoid duplicative signs or repetitive signs. There provided many comments on the privacy graphics and some considerations for Planning Commission, which I will get into when we get to that section. And ultimately, the ARC did not recommend approval of the proposed parking garage signs. I'll get into that a little bit more as well when we get to that section. So here is the proposed master sign program. As I mentioned, it includes tenant sign types. So each tenant would be permitted any combination of a wall-mounted sign with facelit or halo-lit channel letters, a canvas awning sign or a metal canopy sign if they had one, a blade sign, interior ID signs, and window graphics. And they can, again, use a combination of this provided they fall within their sign area. The master sign program also breaks out the buildings by building type. So your larger anchor tenants are shown in blue. The theater tenant is its own in that kind of orange color. Inline tenants are just your interior tenants in purple. And then the green are the end cap or corner tenants. And so the way that the proposed master sign program calculates sign area for each tenant is based on frontage. And so the primary frontage, the tenant would be allowed 1 square feet of sign area per 1 linear feet of building frontage. That is consistent with how our city sign ordinance allows that currently, and how the current master sign program does it as well. But what's new in this master sign program is allowance for signs on secondary frontages, and that's at a rate of 0.75 square feet of sign area for each 1 foot of linear building frontage on those secondary frontages. So as I mentioned, this is a deviation from what the city sign ordinance allows. So that does require a use permit or a major sign adjustment for additional sign area for tenants. So we'll go a little bit into the sign locations and some of the kind of changes is what's being proposed. As I mentioned, inline tenants, any tenant essentially that has that rear facade would now be allowed to have a sign. And so I've highlighted just a couple areas in this map in the red just to show where those could exist and where signage is currently not proposed. The applicant expressed a need for signage on these rear elevations to kind of enhance wayfinding for people who obviously, park in those parking lots and then want to go find the tenant that they're visiting. And so the applicant is requesting this to help facilitate that circulation. And in terms of letter heights, this is cut out from the master sign program, so I won't go into detail here, but just to highlight some of the letter heights. For anchor tenants, maximum letter heights would be 48 inches. And these again are for those main those larger tenant spaces, or 60 inches if it's 2 lines. For inline tenants and for end cap tenants, it would be 28 inches for a single line of text or 42 inches for 2 lines of text. So looking into some details now. So this is what would be proposed for anchor tenants. Showing here with what could be a 2-line tenant name for a 60-inch height. And another example, this is for building M.4 specifically, which is the former Bed Bath & Beyond space. And this is showing a sample where it could potentially be 2 different tenants in that location, so how they would be stacked. One thing I will point out is that when ARC reviewed the proposal at the time, there was language included allowing backer panels for signs, and the ARC had some discussion on when a backer panel might be appropriate and asked the applicant to include more additional language clarifying that, which the applicant has. So I have the new language here, which is in line with what ARC requested, clarifying that backer panels might be appropriate if they're part of the tenant's branding. And so they were okay with it as long as it was part of the tenant's branding. If they're not part of the tenant's branding, then they would be subject to come back to ARC for review and approval of a backer panel, and that panel be painted to match the adjacent wall. Part of the reason for this is that our design guidelines for signs encourage individual letters and not backer panels. And so the ARC felt that was a language that they were supportive of. And so the applicant did include that. Moving on to the inline tenants, here are some details on what signage could look like for both the primary frontage on the left-hand side and then the rear elevation on the right. And just looking at that rear elevation again, here's just a photo taken of what that area could look like, or what it is, now, and then what it would look like with signage. This is the area where the ARC was requesting the applicant include a consistent horizontal center line for all signs to ensure that when signs are mounted on this elevation that they are at a consistent height, just for visual consistency. And so that is a discussion item for tonight. And then end cap tenants, these are the corner tenants, subject to the same specific sign dimensions and regulations as inline tenants, but these tenants would have additional frontages because they're on the corners. And so in certain situations, these tenants could be allowed to have signs on 3 elevations. And in those situations, that's where ARC was requesting that if 3 wall signs were proposed, that 3rd wall sign come back to the ARC for review, just to avoid the idea of repetitive signage being included. And so the applicant included language for that as well. The other thing that came up at ARC that's being proposed are these backlit windows or panels that are located just on the former Bed Bath & Beyond tenant space. There's 6 of them, 3 on each elevation on that corner, and the applicant is proposing to use these as display for either center events, as stated here, holiday themes, leasing opportunities, or tenant to advertise tenant goods and services. And so staff is recommending that last part be eliminated regarding tenant good and services. And instead, these only be restricted for use of the property owner to advertise events for the downtown or leasing opportunities or things like that affect the entire downtown. These would, if they advertise tenants, goods and services that are not for these tenants in this building, those would be considered like an off-site sign. And additionally, we have regulations in our sign ordinance that prohibit the advertising of goods and services. Signage is restricted to the tenant name only. And so another discussion item tonight, the staff is recommending that, again, these only be allowed for use by the property owner for their events for downtown. And I'll just quickly show you what's being proposed for some of the other sign options, as I mentioned. So applicants could have canopy or awning signs. Here are some examples from the master sign program. The ARC did not have any concerns with the proposals here. Or blade signs are also an option for tenants. And again, the ARC did not have any comments on these. And window signs and privacy graphics. So the master sign program would limit window signs to no more than 25% of the window area. That is consistent with what the current master sign program allows. The new part that's being proposed here is the use of privacy graphics. And so these would be a vinyl graphic proposed on a storefront window that would cover all or majority of the window. It could not be signage. It would have to be a solid color or an abstract pattern not related to the tenant's logo or business. But it would be intended for those tenants that need privacy because of their use, whether they're personal service use or something related to that. And so as I mentioned, the ARC had a discussion about privacy graphics and provided some considerations for the Planning Commission. There was mixed feedback from the ARC to support the privacy graphics. And so these considerations are just, they passed along to the Planning Commission. And so they requested that the graphics at least allow for some visibility at the bottom or the top windows to show that there was some activity within the space without compromising privacy. That they really stressed that the graphics should be limited, especially when they front Crescent Drive. They were less concerned if they faced a secondary elevation. That they consider, the Planning Commission consider regulating if there's two adjacent tenants who both needed privacy graphics, regulating that scenario. And so that I think there were concerns that you might get a whole series of storefront windows that were blocked. And then the other request was considering treating these like window signs and limiting them to no more than 25% of the window area, which is currently how these would be regulated. And so that's it for the requirements for the signs for the tenant buildings. I'll now move on to the parking garage signs. And so here is an image from the master sign program, but these are actually what's already been approved. It's obviously included in the master sign program because this will replace the existing master sign program. So for context, here's what's been approved. And the applicant is proposing 3 additional parking garage signs on that east elevation there. And the 3 signs here would be, if it's a single line, 27 inches, or I believe 42 if it's a double line. And then you can see some samples of what that would look like on the elevation. And here's just an image showing that face with some of the existing signage that was already installed and where the new ones would go. And so as I mentioned, the ARC also had a lengthy discussion about the parking garage signs and ultimately did not recommend that the Planning Commission approve them as proposed for several reasons. I'll summarize here. The ARC felt that the signs were not grand enough and would likely not provide the desired visibility due to the fact that that wall is set back from the tenant below, the existing vegetation, the existing roads, and the buildings that are surrounding it, that the signs would not actually be visible from where the applicant was hoping to achieve visibility. The ARC encouraged the applicant ultimately to consider an alternate design option, such as a architectural statement feature or like a trellis on the corner that would bring the signs out to the corner of the building as a feature piece and allow, therefore, more visibility. They did say, though, that if the Planning Commission was supportive of the signs as proposed, that they requested that the final design of those 3 signs come back to the ARC for their final approval, and requested that language be added that a tenant may only have 1 sign on the parking garage. So if they already had a sign on the south elevation, they couldn't then have a second sign on the other elevation. And then ultimately adding a maximum width to the proposed garage signs, which the applicant did add that part in. And so that's another item of discussion for tonight. And I'll just end with the freestanding signs through the site. So the applicant is proposing, excuse me, to replace the existing freestanding signs with ones that are in similar size and location and shape, but a different design. So here is what is proposed now. This is at that primary corner where the Golf Galaxy tenant currently is. And that would replace the existing kind of metal sign that's there now. But these signs, I will say they do meet the requirements in our sign ordinance. And here are some additional signs that would be located at other intersections. They're all in line with that kind of tan stucco base and a green sign background for the tenants. So the discussion topics tonight are the allowance of wall signs on the rear elevation for inline tenants. That's, as I mentioned, that's a new requirement. The ARC did want to stress that they were supportive of those only if they faced parking areas. The requirement for that consistent horizontal center line for all of those rear facing signs to achieve that visual consistency, that was not added by the applicant. Consider provisions for the privacy graphics and if those need to be limited. The size and location of the additional parking garage signs on that east elevation. And then the use of those backlit wall signs on the north and east elevation of the former Bed Bath & Beyond, and if those should be allowed for tenant identification as well. And so I think with that, so staff's recommendation tonight is that the Planning Commission review the proposed master sign program, take public testimony, accept the CEQA exemption, and adopt the recommended resolution, approving the use permit and the sign permit subject to the findings and conditions of approval. I'm here if you have any questions, and the applicant team is here as well.
Thank you. So with that, does the commission have any questions for staff?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first question is, the signs that would face the parking lot, they're the same height as the front signage, 48 inches? That's my first question. That's really big to me.
So the letter heights for inline tenants, they're all a maximum of 28 inches for single lines or 42 inches for two lines. However, so that would be the same ladder heights for all frontages, but the total sign area for primary frontages is 1 square foot per 1 linear foot, whereas on secondary, it's only 0.75. So they could be allowed the same letter heights, just less sign area. So I guess it depends on, what the tenant is, if they could fit that.
And the signage that was requested on the east elevation, do we have any pictures from the freeway, if you can see those signs at all? Because you certainly can't see them from Contra Costa Boulevard.
I was trying to get a photo, I'll be honest. And there are maybe brief pockets where you might grab a quick snap. I'll just say it was hard for me to grab those pictures, and so I didn't include them.
Okay, because we discussed this a few years ago about putting Pleasant Hill up on top of the garage in the economic development meetings, and that didn't go anywhere, probably for the same reason. So I'm not a big fan of that. And I think the last one I had is the Bed Bath & Beyond building, the Gregory Lane corner. I think if that building is rented to whoever, that they have the right to use those signs as they need, not for advertising signage, but to me, putting a graphic in there of a woman in a dress or a man in a suit or whatever, let's say, as opposed to having a mannequin in the window, is the same thing. No name branding, but to have some kind of picture of what they sell, would fine. I'm not a big fan of putting advertising for downtown in there if there's a tenant in there. And then while it's empty, that's fine. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on that last point from Commissioner Mascaro. Those backlit windows, I went down there and looked at them, and right now they're, it looks like they have whatever the graphic is right up against, it's over the glass, or is it behind the glass?
I can't speak to what it is right now. My understanding is that,
Or
It
is
would
there
be-
even glass? I guess that's my question.
yeah, well, the way that it's proposed, at least in this master sign program, is that there would be like a print or a vinyl, applied to the glass, or if it's maybe
Okay,
a
so
plexi
there is
material.
glass. Is there a shadow box behind it like it is on the Crescent and Contra Costa corner where Carter's has those shallow merchandise display windows?
I
It's not
believe-
like those.
I believe that there is like a three-dimensional element to them, but I would actually defer to the applicant who's here tonight
Okay.
for clarification.
So, yeah, so my question was, if those are currently windows, then what Commissioner Mascaro was saying about whether a mannequin sits in that vitrine, I guess they're called vitrines, or whether it's a graphic in that vitrine would be similar to what the Carter store currently has, which is, I can't remember, I think I've seen them have like discount sales or something like that, but no merchandise in there. So that, I guess we'll have that question for the applicant. If you don't mind, I have a couple other questions related to other items. I don't think I saw, or maybe I did see, in the chart that calls out letter sizes for canopy signage. Is there a maximum size? Because I think I saw various. So they would, the tenant would have to balance out whatever signage based on their window graphics and from that list of 8 or 10 combination.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good point. There was not max letter heights for those awning or canopy signs. If they were, I think it depends if they were considered to be their primary sign or maybe a secondary sign. One could argue you could apply those letter heights if it's a primary sign, but it is not clear, and so it could be more clear in the master sign program.
I could see someone want to put their primary sign on the metal canopy. The awning, the fascia of the awning is limited, but the sloped portion, they could do a larger sign there as well. So I think it would be helpful to have some clarity on the maximum letter heights on awnings. And then in relationship to the privacy graphics, so we were talking about only 25% of the storefront glazing area can be opaque, covered by graphics, or,
That's what the current master sign program regulations are.
okay, so for a use where, as you said, for personal services or something like that, what would preclude a tenant from using window treatment and covering the whole?
We would not, there's no regulations that would preclude them from using window treatments.
Do we have anything in any of our ordinances in regards to window treatment?
And you're talking about like blinds or things on the inside not applied to the glass, correct? No.
If we're concerned about visibility and transparency?
No, we don't. We don't have anything that would regulate window treatments because the current, I believe, and I can double check this, the current master sign program speaks only to applications directly to the glass.
Exterior, okay. So I guess related to that, that's something I would think is for our discussion and consideration, that if there is a situation where there's a use that for personal services that requires privacy, that the opaque band, I don't know if there's a way to regulate I don't know who I'm looking at, the opaque percentage relative to the total area, and then also whether we discuss window treatments.
And actually, I'd like to clarify, I just did a quick dive into our ordinance. In the commercial section of our ordinance and our additional regulations. So not related to signage, but just for commercial properties. We do have a provision that says not more than 30% of any storefront door and or window pane shall be blocked or made opaque through the use of window treatments, paints, vinyl applications, etc. That's in the commercial section of the ordinance. Now downtown's in a PUD. And so, you know, just for context, we do have other sections of our ordinance that do regulate that in the same manner as window signs are regulated.
Here in this particular application, we're talking about graphics maxing at 25%, but in the reference that you just provided, there's a 30% maximum. So we'd have to align that in some fashion, I would think. Okay, my last point that I'd like to bring up for the commission's consideration is, and also a question for staff is, should the applicant wish to consider electronic billboard signage, where would that fall? Would that be an amendment to this master sign program?
Yeah, that would not be one of the approved sign types. If, you know, if we're on the same page of what an electronic billboard signage is.
One we have, where I'm not over here, on Cleveland.
The City Hall
That City
one?
Hall has?
Mhm. Yeah, so that would involve an amendment to the master sign program.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, I will close that portion. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Avni. I work for the landlord, and I don't have a presentation apart from what Haley's has shown us. But, you know, really the intent for us has always been to kind of simplify the existing master sign program, and that's why we're proposing some of these changes so that it is easier for tenants and for new incoming tenants and current tenants to be able to update signage, for them to be able to have their brand identity. And also, so there's been some back and forth with tenants and with the city. I'm just trying to get for them to get their signage to match the branding that they want and for it to be acceptable for the master sign program. So the way we set this up and what our intent is really to just kind of simplify this, give tenants a little bit more options of what they can do with their signage, and so they can be consistent with their brand identity. One of the things that were an issue with the privacy graphics with ARC, you know, our intent for the privacy graphics has always been just to really only use it for when it's necessary, for tenants that it's necessary for them to operate. You know, I'll use an example as one of our tenants who does not currently have window graphics, but their business does need them. They can't operate without the privacy. They can't have their tenant customers in there. So bringing a whole variety of tenants to downtown Pleasant Hill, we would need some of that flexibility with the graphics, so we can bring in tenants that, you know, may not be the traditional restaurant or retail. They might be a service-based provider, which will bring more people to downtown, bring more business. So we're really trying to just make it so that there's more tenants, more variety of tenants that are coming in, and also make it easier for tenants to be able to operate in those spaces when, you know, there is a lot of windows and all of that. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
You know, I'm still a little confused about the building at the corner up here where Bed Bath & Beyond
Yes.
was. Okay. So what is it that we have this condition that's in here now that I'm still not entirely clear on, but what is your preference with regard to those windows that are along Contra Costa Boulevard?
So the Vessar team would like to be able to use those for, again, marketing events or that are happening at the center, or be able to have just maybe that we have certain tenants. But as you know, that I guess the way that those would be used would be our intent right now is for either marketing certain events that we're having at the center, whether it be the summer concert series or anything of that sort that is a community event. We would want to use it for that, but we would also have tenants use it, but not as a branding kind of where, it's, Ross has a big logo or anything like that. We would try to stay within the parameters of not having specific logos and specific brands and specific tenants, but just kind of giving an idea of what is out at the center right now.
Could we put up the picture of those windows? Because I'm a little confused still, right? If we can keep talking about this so that we're all on the same page. When are you're in charge of the leasing as well, right? Your company?
No, I work more on the construction and the tenant coordination side. So I work mainly with a lot of the tenants. I do work with the leasing team a lot, but when signage is coming through, I'm the one that is reviewing it for the landlord and then approving tenants or not approving tenants. So,
because where I'm getting confused here is with making a requirement here that you're essentially asking for, but if you're negotiating with the tenant, then don't you have control over what goes into those windows? Maybe I'm missing a major point here, but
I think those windows are our intent is using them for our marketing to use, but we don't have specific things that we're going to say exactly that this is what we're going to use these windows for. So there's no specific of, hey, it's only, these 3 windows are going to be for this particular thing. We're going to be using these windows for whether, we have special marketing stuff going on, stuff like that, but it wouldn't, we wouldn't have that these 2 windows are for this particular thing or these 3 windows are this for one particular thing.
Okay, so when you're talking with a tenant, I'm a little confused about what the city's role in this is because it sounds as though the property owner would like to be able to use those windows for the purpose that you're describing, some maybe center-wide events, but isn't that something that would be a condition of the lease if you're leasing that space out? I'm a little confused about our role.
Okay, so I think I better understand your question. Is what you're saying is, since those windows are part of a tenant space, right? How would we negotiate that with the tenant? That would definitely be something that is negotiated during the lease process. That building. We don't have a tenant for it as of right now, but there is a chance that building may, it might not be 1 tenant, it might be 2 tenants or, something along the lines. I don't know yet, or, we don't have someone right now. But I think that will be negotiated with the tenant, and that'll be something that landlord's leasing team and tenant's leasing team will decide. And but landlord would like control of those panels in terms of what goes on them.
So basically, it's using this master sign program through the city to ensure that the owner has the right to use those 3 windows.
No, I don't think that would get negotiated in the lease. What we want to do is, because we want to include that signage in the MSP so that, you know, when we are going and changing, you know, wanting to change the signs or wanting to do something different, that it is something that's already been addressed in the MSP.
Okay.
So we're trying to make sure that everything that would be something that we're going to be changing is addressed in this master sign program so that it does not come up in the future of what to do with this and you know, of kind of a what if and how can we use it? And then we have to go back to ARC again because it's an external change. So we're kind of trying to avoid that. We're trying to cover every kind of corner and cover every aspect of the signage at the center.
You know, that is, thank you. It's coming clearer. So it's those 3 windows on the end
There's 3 and 3. So there's a total of 6 windows at that corner.
and 3 on, okay. All right. I think I understand better. In other words, you want the flexibility to control what goes in those windows.
Yes, but we also want to make sure that it is addressed in the MSP so that there's no questions in the future.
Okay. I think that makes more sense to me. I wasn't really sure what it was that you were trying to achieve here, you know, and what the city role in that was. But thank you.
I have a question, but I think Judy was first.
I just want to follow up on that because what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, is that you want to use that potentially for tenants elsewhere within the shopping area, not necessarily the tenants that move into that building. Is that correct?
So the reason it's in the MSP is so that we can make sure that we have requirements for these windows in the MSP, how they are used, on which tenant and, you know, whether it's for advertising, marketing event or anything like that, you know, that's going to come in the future because I don't, you know, at this point, we don't know who's
You
going
don't
to.
have any intention.
Yeah, we don't know who's going to go in there. We don't know, you know, what's the best, you know, how we're going to use those, but we do want to put it in the MSP so that there are requirements in the MSP that help us understand, you know, in the future when, you know, this does come up, that these requirements are in there and they are addressed so that, you know, when we are deciding to put something up in those windows, it doesn't have to go through ARC and either it can be, you know, just approved at staff level or something of that sort. So we're kind of avoiding that. So we just want to address every single aspect of the MSP for kind of every sign that we have.
Thank you. I misinterpreted your application, so thank you.
I have a couple of questions, one for you and probably one for staff. Do you expect these signs to be read while somebody's driving by or just while somebody's walking by?
Which ones? These ones?
Yeah.
I think the size of them would allow for people to see them and read them while they're driving or walking by as well. I think just the sheer size of
They're
those.
like 4 by 6 or something, or?
They are, I don't know. They're quite large. I would say
or 4
they're
by 8,
probably over 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Like a
they
sheet
are
of
very
plywood or
large.
something, probably.
Yes, they're very large.
And then my other question would be to staff, would, if they were to put signs up for other tenants, would we allow that? That'd be considered signage for another tenant over and above what they're allowed?
So it's somewhat similar to the parking garage as well. So it's, you know, it would be allowing additional signs off-site or, you know, away from the tenant area. Because this is a master sign program and because we're looking at all of downtown, you know, it is still included in the downtown. And so it can be looked at holistically. So it's an option that could be included. Part of what staff understands the applicant's desire to have all this, the flexibility written in.
Sure.
And so then from staff's perspective, we're trying to look at every scenario that could occur and make sure that that it's something that the commission is supportive of. And if so, that it's clear so that we don't run into a scenario where we weren't anticipating other tenants using these. We didn't address that, something like that. So
Yeah, my only concern, I mean, I have no problem with them using for downtown wide events, that the tree lighting, the art and the what do you call it?
I forgot. Yeah.
chalk drawing events, I mean, those kind of things, I have no problem with that. My only concern is that, and it's probably none of my business anyway, that you're gonna get tenants to just say, we're gonna give you X number of dollars to put our sign in that window. And another tenant says, I'd love to put my sign in that window, but I don't have X number of dollars to do it. So they're gonna get more advertising than somebody else for that. That's my concern. You're gonna get whoever, the candy store or whatever that says, I can't afford $1,000 a month to put a sign up there. But Jack's or somebody else has no problem doing that. And so they're gonna get more advertising than somebody else. That's my only concern.
I understand. Maybe, I don't know if there's, language, maybe we could.
It's just me, the other commissioners might not feel that way.
I
just
have a
don't wanna-
question to follow up on that. Is there a proposed condition of approval, which this language up here on the screen includes, in that it's limited to exactly those particular uses, and the application of translucent print applied surface mounted temporary signage?
So right now, as proposed, condition of approval 1.6 addresses these.
Uh-huh.
And it says the master sign program shall be revised to include language restricting the use of the 6 backlit windows on the north and east elevations of building M.4 for downtown related events and information only. No tenant advertising shall be permitted on these windows.
So that potentially addresses some of this discussion that we've had.
Dave, do you have a concern with that? I mean, I think.
I have no problem with that.
Right.
That's the condition that Haley read.
Through the chair. Just a general thought here. If we have a vacant space and we get a tenant in that space, and that tenant is maybe struggling a little bit more or less than a tenant next to it, shouldn't we be advertising that business to, and by we, I don't mean the city, I mean, provide the flexibility to support the use that's coming in there? I mean, I understand your argument, but I also don't necessarily think it's my responsibility to sort of figure out what works best there. If there's a business that's struggling and we want to help that business there, let them advertise.
Well, no, I understand that, but I guess my point was that if it's going to be, if you're going to use it for advertising the businesses downtown, that it should be rotated through the businesses at no charge to the tenant. That everybody should get a month or whatever on each sign, maybe certain times of the year that are more apropos to that business at a certain time of year. But my concern is that you're going to get tenants that can afford to pay for that window space. And if you're already struggling, you're not going to pay to put a sign up on that space. You're not going to be able to put a sign up on that space. That's my only concern. If you rotate it through everybody at no charge or at the same charge, let's go that way, then that's fine. But I think, if you're going to charge X number of dollars,
One point, it sounds like we're moving into commission discussion.
Yes.
So do we have any other?
I actually do have a question.
Okay.
On the privacy sign. So I'm trying to get a sense from you what the right percentage looks like. If 25% isn't it, what's typical?
Well, so typically, we wouldn't approve privacy graphics unless they were absolutely necessary.
Okay.
So for example, Restore Hyper Wellness, they do injections and they have a nurse's room. That has to avoid HIPAA violations, all that has to be completely closed off, right? We have Spa Via who does massages. You have Restore who's doing massages. So it would only be limited to those types of tenants. And that's kind of what if it was absolutely necessary, and I think one of the items that maybe did come up in ARC was that maybe it could be approved at staff level where staff can say, yes, this is, necessary for them to operate their business. And so we'll approve these full graphics because it's necessary for their business. If it was, Morgan Territory wants to cover their 4 windows because the sun is too bright, no, we wouldn't allow that, and we would expect, we wouldn't expect an exception for that. But anything that is going to require, something that you wouldn't be doing with others around, you'd probably need full graphics for those windows, and that's really the only reason we're putting that in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I would like to open public comment.
No public comment, Chris.
Thank you. Close public comment. And then now let's move into commission discussion. And while we're doing this, Haley, could you put up the discussion? Okay. So we have a lot to talk about.
Chair.
Do we want to talk about just because we were on that? Does anybody have any
Chair,
more?
if you could turn on your
comment?
mic. Or your mic's off.
Sorry, do we have any more comments on item 5? Because we were talking about that.
My comments on item 5 actually blend to item 1, so I'm happy to just go through all mine if I can. Just start with one, but,
Could we just do one at a time so
Oh,
everybody
okay.
comments? on-
Yes.
okay.
So since we were on 5, I'd like to finish 5 first.
Okay, then
if
I'll
that's
finish
okay
it.
with everyone here.
I'll make the point of 5 I'd like. It seems to me that if that area is rented, then the tenant should have first right. I like the idea of the signage being related to what's occurring in the location so that it's not confusing, that you don't have a sign for Pete's Coffee on one end of the building and Pete's Coffee is quite a ways away from there. So I think when it was Bath and Beyond, those were Bed Bath and Beyond signs on those windows, and that was logical and reasonable. And to the extent that the tenant is not interested in that sign and is willing to use it for the greater good of the events that are occurring in the area, then I think that's wonderful. And those 2 options make good logical sense. But once you start advertising other businesses in the downtown area at that site, that loses the continuity and some of the value I think we're getting out of item 1, which is where do you park to get convenient access to the things that you need. I think it becomes confusing, and I just don't recommend that for signage. So that's my opinion for 5.
Okay, thank you.
So my thought is that this isn't a sign program for any specific business as much as it is it's a master plan for that area. So I'm fine with being as flexible as we can to sort of make it all work. So I'm okay with letting advertising there, even if it's for businesses that's not in that specific location, because I think overall it helps the entire area. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Any other comments on item 5?
Well, I'm okay with the proposed language, the language
Yeah.
we saw on the screen.
Thank you. As am I.
I'm sorry, to clarify the language that we saw on the screen with the, does it match the condition of approval? Because I think there's more in that text box that we saw on the screen than is in the condition of approval.
Correct. So as the master sign program is proposed, would allow, oops, it's the wrong side, would allow the most flexibility for those backlit panels to be used for tenant advertising or advertising center events. That differs from what staff's proposed condition of approval currently is, which would limit it to only downtown events. and no tenant advertising.
And that second line about the translucent applied graphics, that's implies that it's it
That-
implies that it's temporary. Is that also in the condition of approval, or that's the applicant's proposal?
That's the applicant's proposal.
Okay.
And the condition of approval doesn't propose to modify that piece, just the use of
Okay,
the
thank
signs.
you for clarifying that. So, Commissioner Vavrick, to follow up on your comment, that would be that you're in agreement with the condition of approval?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there, I think, given the complexity of this and just wanting to get a sense of where people are we generally okay with the condition of approval as Haley's just described it? Or is that something that we need to talk about more?
I'm okay with
Yes.
it.
I'm good with it.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to item 1 then, which is the inline height and justification. So Commissioner Weber, you had comments?
Well, I just wanted to say that as a resident of Pleasant Hill who uses this downtown area quite a bit, I think it would be very helpful to have signs on the back, and I appreciate that the signs will be a little smaller than the front signs. And I also appreciate the distinction that the lettering could actually be as big, but the sign itself would be a bit smaller.
Mhm.
And I think it'll help people locate their vehicles and access our services more efficiently. So I think that it's been handled very well by ARC, and I'm happy to see that change made.
Thank you. Any other comments on item 1? Is everyone generally in,
Yes.
yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreement with what was, okay, wonderful. Okay, item number 2, the consistent horizontal center height for all rear facing signs for visual consistency. Or is that something that we would all be in agreement on?
Yes.
Yes, generally?
Yes.
Okay.
Number 3?
I'm getting to number 3 right now.
Okay.
So, do you have comments on number 3? This is the provisions limiting use privacy graphics at storefront windows.
So this is going back to 25%?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying what the right percentage really is. You know, I mean, I think just because I think it's 25% or 30% or 50%, I'm not convinced that that's the right number. If there's a certain business that feels that they need to have 60% because it sort of fits what they're trying to accomplish, I mean, they know better than me.
Mhm.
I mean, so on one hand, I do see the need to sort of have a say because you don't want a bunch of windows that are completely covered, like up and down the block. I get that.
Mhm.
But I also think that, you know, saying 25% may be limiting, and that will just bring folks back here to address an issue. So I understand some businesses do legitimately need privacy. And I would feel better if I was using a business that requires privacy and then you have folks just sort of looking. And I don't know if I really like, you know, the top or the bottom being open. I mean, I just think that there's got to be a way to figure this out that doesn't necessarily include a percentage.
Thank you.
Well, I think, we've had I believe it's 30% citywide. And we've had that for a number of years, probably 20 or more. And I don't think we've had a big problem with that. Some people are going to go over that limit, and then you just have to wait for code enforcement. But I mean, I think you need a number because otherwise they're just going to block the whole window.
All right, 85. Does that work?
Great number. But that's too much.
That's my point.
To clarify the reference that Haley, you gave previously, that's the 30% is for all commercial areas.
Yeah, it's all of our commercial zones.
So it's already in our ordinance.
Right.
Wait a second.
30%.
Isn't that window coverings, not? And the reason are window treatments, and I want to make a distinction because a window treatment is something that I use to block sun, and it's not used all day, every day. It's not the same as a privacy graphic. So I think they're completely different things used for completely different purposes. So I don't want to mix those two up. And so can you clarify what the 30% is?
It does actually specify window treatments as being regulated by the 30% as well as signs, vinyl applications, anything that blocks a window.
Oh, okay. So everything.
So that
Okay.
would technically be a treatment as well, because it's a visual obstruction. And so I think we're at a point where, yes, it's hard to have a hard percentage, but at some point you have to have one, I think, or else it's going to get, so is 30% is already there. Is that something that we can live with here?
Is this document's at 25%?
It does say 25.
I can live with 30%. But I also have another comment.
Yes.
Oh, what was the reason for going to 25?
So just to be clear, the proposed master sign program doesn't have any limit. The staff recommended condition of approval is to limit them to 25% simply because that's consistent with the current MSP, and that's was brought up by the ARC as a recommendation.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think I would support the 25%.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say, I totally understand this need for privacy for certain types of businesses. And I think, we got a good description of what those are. I think we also know what they are if we've walked the downtown area. So my question then is, do we have a process that the applicant can go through to basically say, look, we've got this semi-medical use or personal service use as it was described, and it really does require a high percentage of this privacy graphic. I would be fine with that going to staff and making that determination on a case-by-case basis, because every business is going to be a little bit different, but I can definitely understand some that would, need almost full coverage. Maybe, and maybe it's not full coverage. There's some light over the top or something, but I think that, staff would be able to work that out.
I would agree with that approach. Would it be a condition of the use permit or tied to the use permit rather
I
of
think
the
it needs-
particular tenant?
It needs to be part of the master sign program as opposed to because the tenant may not even need a use permit because they may already be a permitted use downtown. So that it's just, many of those tenants are not going to go through a use permit
Or-
process at all.
Personal services, what's the right word? Permitted use?
Yes, they're
So they
permitted.
would not necessarily need, okay, I see.
Question, Haley. This up here says privacy graphics. Are you going to interpret that, or is it, I didn't recall seeing it in the resolution. Are you going to take that to include window treatments or just the graphics as it says up here?
The way that it's currently written would be the graphics because it specifically speaks to like a vinyl material affixed to a window.
Okay,
That's how it's currently written.
want to make sure, because I know some places in the past, we've allowed drapes or something to go up on the inside of the windows or privacy screen to be set up, but not on the window itself. And it's kind of a weird rule. So I had that at my location. As a matter of fact, I had a sign laying up against the window, and this might have been changed. It's been a couple of days. That I was not allowed to keep, but if I hung that sign 6 inches or 12 inches back from the window, it was totally fine.
Mhm.
Same sign. So I just want to make sure that we're just talking about the graphics. Okay. I'm done.
So then on item 3, where do we sit on our discussion for this?
I'm sorry, I think I have to ask Haley a clarifying question on Commissioner Vavrick's statement. We currently have a process. They just have to come back to us as a tenant and say, the tenant needs additional privacy.
Currently, the master sign program prohibits any sort of covering of the windows more than 30% or 20. I'm confused. 20 to 25% currently. And so if a tenant were to approach the city today and need privacy graphics, they would have to amend the master sign program and
Oh,
go through the whole process.
so there is no process.
There's no process currently.
For individual consideration.
No, and it would go to Architecture Review Commission.
It would go to ARC.
Mm.
And would it adjust the MSP or would it be a deviation?
Yeah, so the tenant would be requesting a deviation from the master sign program.
Okay, so it can be handled on a per tenant basis as the tenants arrive with the need. And is that how it have we successfully seen that occur?
No, I don't believe we've even had any. Oh, we have. Okay.
Okay.
Troy's nodding. Yes.
In the interest of maybe trying to toe a line that maybe we don't need to, but, I think Commissioner Vavrick has noted that there's certain uses that I think we understand may need more privacy than others. And, if the commission were so inclined, they could allow personal service uses in downtown to maybe have a double window coverage provision. And that's the entire window system, not just one pane. That way they could block a window and ensure that other portions of the windows remain open, and that could be subject to staff review. I'm just trying to address, I think, what Commissioner Vavrick said and understanding what downtown's goal is in terms of some of these certain uses that require more blockage than a more traditional restaurant or retail. And the personal services definition in downtown master plan seems to cover those. Beauty shops, massage,
Yes.
barber, et
Okay.
cetera. So that's
So-
an option to consider. I mean, it kind of splits the line of, I think, what downtown wants versus what the commission is struggling with, but it gives them more flexibility for those types of uses. And it gives more leeway for staff to approve certain numbers that may not necessarily be appropriate across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I think that's a very helpful solution. So that gives us flexibility. So would the commission be favorable to looking at item 3 in that light, where we would amend that by saying that personal service facilities would be allotted to double, what was the term you used?
Well, if the number is 25 or 30, whatever it is, then
Right.
you would just double it for personal service
Right.
uses.
A double allotment.
So the condition of approval states the 25% baseline, and for any use greater than 25% needs to be reviewed and approved by the Architectural Review Commission.
Right.
So there's something in there already.
Right, so we're gonna modify that.
We're going to modify that
Modify
so
it
that
to-
if it's a personal service, then they could have a double allotment without having to go through ARC. Is
So
my
we're
understanding.
Taking the ARC review out of it, and having it reviewed at staff level, or
For personal
for
services.
personal services? Okay.
But only up
Up
to
to
50%.
50%.
Only up to
So
50%.
Is what if a tenant needs more than 50%?
Then they have to come to
Yeah.
ARC.
You could increase the number if you're concerned 50 is not enough for personal
Let me,
services.
if I might ask the other question, which is why was the MSP set at 25 when the ordinance is at 30? And if we set it at 30 and doubled it to 60, would that meet people's needs? No?
No, 30 was something I injected in the conversation just to get it moving.
No, I
Um,
thought
but-
Haley read it out of the ordinance.
No.
No? Okay.
No, Haley read it out of the window covering ordinance for commercial spaces,
Correct.
which, and then we I locked onto that as a way to say, well, hey, it was over there. Can we just move that here if we're concerned about providing some flexibility? But the flexibility the issue of flexibility seems to really surround personal services. So I think that Troy's actually given us a fairly elegant solution where up to a point that gets, if somebody personally, if somebody wants to cover all their windows, I want to know about it and I want to see it and I want to review it. I think that's fair because it does change the look of a downtown considerably. So I think it's fair for that to actually go through ARC. It's not, I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
I concur, so I'm happy with the language as it stands in the resolution. Is that your statement? And are you in agreement with that, or did you want it to be double at 50? That's different than what's in the resolution.
Yes, no, I think Troy gave us a good solution to provide some flexibility at those places, but then if there's more, then.
Which means going to 50 for personal service uses.
Correct.
Okay. Just for clarification.
Yes. Are we okay with that? Does that, it's a complicated issue. I don't think there's going to be an ideal solution. But
That's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, but I just want to ask Troy a quick question. In your experience, would 50% provide sufficient coverage for businesses that we've seen coming into the downtown?
In some respects, it depends. Some tenant spaces by its nature has more windows than others. And if they happen to choose that tenant space, there's more window area to cover. But it's impossible to understand each and every tenant, so you have to benchmark it somewhere.
Okay, no, that's a good explanation, and I wasn't thinking in terms of the different heights of the windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be clear, the 25% only comes from the existing downtown MSP.
Right.
The citywide provision is 30. So if the commission wants to give everyone 30 and then double it to 60, to be clear, the 25% was taken from the MSP. I don't want any of the commissioners to think that 25% is the rule across the city. That was taken from the previous MSP, and that's what was proposed.
no, I think we understood that. Thank you.
Yeah, the question is, do we agree with that or the 25%?
Can we just make it consistent?
Because I don't think it's a big difference.
We can absolutely make it consistent and there's wisdom in doing so.
Let's do 30
Okay.
and 60.
All right. So we will, okay. Does everybody comfortable with that? Okay,
Yes.
good. All right, item 4, size and location of additional parking garage signage on the east elevation of the parking garage. Does anyone have any further comments on this, or are we comfortable with what was presented?
I'm not sure anybody's gonna see it, which isn't my problem, but it's a lot of money to put out for signage.
They didn't approve it, so the resolution didn't approve that one section. So if we approve it as written, that area will not have signage.
The Contra Costa side.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
So who did not approve that?
I'm sorry, in the resolution that the
Right, but
Our
Okay,
conditions of
but
approval.
we can still have a conversation about it. We don't
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
have to just grab. I mean, I think the point of having these conversations is to talk through it. I don't see how you see the other signs, frankly. Like, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with that area. I mean, we all drive there, and it almost feels like it has to be pretty big, especially as you sort of move further. But again, I'm not terribly opposed to it. I mean, if it makes sense, I just don't know how useful the signs would be if you can't see them, especially if you're driving on Contra Costa. You probably don't see them at all. You might see the corner one. You may be able to see it from the freeway, but considering that you're going fast, I don't know. So I don't know. I'm open to either or, to be honest with you. I don't have a particular feeling here on this particular item.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't even imagine how you see these signs. I really tried. I mean, I don't think there's any need for any additional signage up there because coming north from Walnut Creek, I have tried every location on CCB. The freeway, I don't know how anybody sees that. I mean, I was afraid to even glance over. at the speeds and the attention that you have to be paying out there. So I thought I might see it coming from Walnut Creek where there's the elevated section of roadway that then drops down into Pleasant Hill, but I couldn't see it from there either. So I'm opposed to additional signage on that wall.
And by saying that, Commissioner Vavrick, that means that you are in agreement with the resolution as it's been presented to us
Yeah.
by staff. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Any other comments on this?
I also agree with the resolution as it's been presented, largely because I value signs that are actually giving you additional information. And I don't want to see signs put up that are difficult to read or you have to distract yourself to try to read. So I find that to be more disruptive than beneficial. So I support the resolution as written.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on item 4? Then we've talked about the discussion items. Commissioner Chang, you had an item about the privacy opaque percentage that you wanted to discuss, but I feel like we dealt with that. Is there anything more you want to say on that?
We dealt with it. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Well, good. That's really good. So with that, for the discussion topics on item 1, it seemed like we were all in agreement. And item 2, it seemed like we were all in agreement with the proposed language by staff. 3, there was a general agreement, but we wanted to up the base percentage to 30% and then provide a double allotment for personal services. And then there was an agreement on 4 and agreement on 5. With that, does anybody want to make a motion at this
Can I
point?
ask a clarifying question on
Absolutely.
5? Are we agreeing on allowing for advertising for other businesses here?
No.
No, we're
they
not.
took that out.
No. My understanding is that we are in agreement with the language in the staff proposal that did not.
Okay, so just for point of reference, I'll support the overall resolution here, but that's one item that I don't agree with, but it's not enough for me to sort of
Okay.
oppose the entire thing, but I just want to be sure that I mentioned that.
Yes. Thank you for
You
that.
wanna
One
clarify?
last question.
Yeah.
Troy, is this going to come back to us again?
I have a follow-up once I hear what your consensus is. I do have a follow-up question
Okay.
related to that.
I think I'd like to see it come back and unless it's not to rehash this, but at least to read the resolution. Make sure what's in there is what we discussed.
Well, that was going to be my question because allowing the increase in store and privacy graphics would be added to the use permit request because it does exceed what the ordinance says.
Mm-hmm.
I would note that I've heard the rationale to support that major use permit, so we could modify the resolution based on the commission discussion, but I wanted to leave it ultimately. If the commission wants to see the revised language, then so be it. We'll bring it back at a subsequent meeting. But I'll leave that up to the commission.
Myself, I'd like to see it
Okay.
again with the revised language. That's just me.
So defer any action tonight until we see the revised resolution.
Okay.
Does
think-
the applicant have any urgency that would make that difficult that you're aware of, Haley?
Not that I'm aware of. We haven't discussed it, though.
Okay, then does somebody want to make a motion relative to that?
Before we do that, I just want to make sure, clarify on point number 5, the way that the condition is currently written would prohibit any use of those backlit wall signs for any tenant advertising. So as written, it would include the subject tenant of that building as well. And so if there was a desire to allow just that tenant to use those signs, it would need to be modified.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you. So do we have a motion to,
I thought we were deferring.
and do we have to
to-
vote on that?
We need a motion to continue.
Need a motion to continue with revised language is my understanding. So that's
Yes.
what I'm asking, if we have that around us somewhere, hiding.
I appreciate Haley pointing out that if we're bringing this back to staff to redraft these conditions of approval, that we should maybe have a conversation about 5, but maybe we've done enough for I don't know if we have the votes to allow for the 2 uses of the tenant who is occupying the space using that for their advertisement, as well as for citywide or downtown-wide events, but that's how it's been used in the past. That's how the neighbors across the street use it. So I would want to allow the owner to have the flexibility to offer that to the tenant that's moving in. I don't know if that's too big of a can of worms to open.
Can I ask staff if an amendment, the process for an amendment, how egregious is that? So should we go with the condition of approval as written without the provision for that particular tenant to have the ability to advertise in those windows? When there is a situation where a tenant would like to broach that topic, an amendment to the master sign program would come back to us. What's that process and how long would that take?
So a deviation from the master sign program would require at least Architecture Review Commission approval. If that deviation, let's say the tenant was requesting to exceed their allowable sign area, by, I think it's more than 20% or significant, is it 20%?
Yeah.
Then it would require a major sign adjustment as well, which is a use permit. That would then also require Planning Commission approval. So it depends a bit on what the request is. At a minimum, Architecture Review Commission or potentially both commissions.
And should a tenant come and make no exterior improvements, they would not have to come in front of Architecture Review Commission. If they were only doing a tenant improvement on the interior, that had no effect on the exterior.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Haley, I'm sorry, can I have a follow-up question? I am under the impression that the prior tenant used that for their advertising. It's the way I interpreted the signs I saw when I drove past. Am I wrong?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct. They
Mhm.
did use it. Okay. Did they came in front of us and got approval for that? Or they must have.
Yeah, that was approved as part of the original MSP. Its usage.
Oh, okay.
Through Chair. So I actually think we're aligned on most of these issues.
Mhm.
The issue is me with item number 5, but that's still not enough to actually not approve this. So I'd like to make a suggestion that we table this to our next meeting. And I actually think this should be brought back on consent item. If we want to pull the actual resolution off, we can. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to see the language, but it also sort of streamlines to get this done. I mean, we're in agreement for the most part. So I think it's just a matter of seeing the text. I'm actually fine not seeing it. We've done that before. We directed staff to make changes. They just do it. And it's fine. But if you all want to see it back, I think the most efficient way, in my opinion, to do this is just to bring it back under consent item our next meeting. We'll have the chance to review the language. If we have issues with it, we can also pull it off consent and talk about it. Or we can just be fine with it.
I agree. I'd love a motion.
All right. So I'll make a
Is
motion
that something
to,
we can do, Troy? Or does it have to have public comment when it comes back?
Well, consent calendar doesn't preclude public comment.
I understand.
Yeah, so we could continue it. I would think we should just continue it to a date specific, preferably April 22nd. And then we can double check if we can put it on consent or it has to be a public hearing because we've closed public hearing. So public hearing's closed. Technically, it can go on consent.
Okay.
But if there's some legal provision why it can't, I don't think there is, but we can double check. But in that period when it's continued, we can refine it and it'll either be on consent or it'll be on the regular hearing item.
And Troy, my understanding is if, for some reason, there is interest from the community to have this item be a public comment, we can always remove it from consent
Yes,
and open a public hearing.
that is correct.
Yes.
That's how it works.
Yeah. So I'd like to make a motion to table this item to April 26th, 2024. 22nd, sorry.
2025, just,
Can we just make sure the applicant is okay with that date?
Okay.
If they even know. Well, no objection,
no
so
objections.
Okay, so let me do this again because I had the wrong date and the wrong year. I'd like to make a motion to table this to April 22nd, 2025.
I'll second that.
Okay, may I have a vote?
the motion included direction as given to staff, correct? You just
Yes.
continued it. so.
Including direction.
All right,
Staff,
thank you.
correct.
Commissioner Chiang,
Yes.
Commissioner Colfin,
Yes.
Commissioner Mascaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Vavrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Weber,
Yes.
Chair Field.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving on to discussion items. So the Planning Commission is requested to select a commissioner to represent the city at the Diversity Commission. Do we have a nomination for that? Is there anything we need to talk about beyond that, that we're still being asked to provide that, so?
No, I just wanted to ensure that the commission understood the responsibility of someone that would be appointed. Commissioner Chiang previously, I believe, did yeoman's work on that commission. But it was clarified for me that what Commissioner Chiang did is not necessarily the expectation or the requirement for a participant on the Diversity Commission. And so I just wanted to make sure that clarification was in place because it might seem an inordinate amount of effort. But I did want to make sure the commission was clear before, any recommendation, nomination, or volunteer is made.
Thank you. Do we have a volunteer, first off? If not, do we have a nomination?
Everyone's running at the same time. I like
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
So,
I guess, Troy, I think what would be really helpful
Continue this.
is continue. I'd like to get a sense sort of what diversity really means. Because I'm not understanding the sort of the role of the commission clearly. Because diversity is a lot of things. And so I don't know if that's a question for you or a question for at a later time that should be answered. I am particularly interested in the disability community, and I'm wondering how that fits into diversity. And if there's an effort on that committee to highlight the needs of the disability community. If that is in fact sort of there, then I would be interested in doing it. But I certainly don't want to sign up for something that's not what I'm expecting.
I would suggest that we continue this item and request a representative from the Diversity Commission provide a presentation.
That's
So
all
I could
fine.
give you my opinion,
Mhm.
but I am no longer serving on the commission. And in answer to your specific question, yes, the disabled community is one of the communities that is represented by the Diversity Commission.
so I think that's an excellent idea. I know that Commissioner Weber also had some questions that I think would be very helpful for them to answer too. So if that would be possible, could we
I can look into that.
will look
and
into that,
find
okay.
I
So
find a date.
we will continue this until we have that, and
Troy, can I ask you a quick question through the chair? Do we need to make a decision today on who's going to serve on that?
Well, I mean,
We needed to make a decision
no
like 6
nomination
months
is
ago.
also a decision. So there, I mean, to answer your question, there's not a deadline, quote unquote.
Okay.
But I do just note that as it currently stands, the Diversity Commission is an even number of participants. And so if there's ever tie votes, they don't have a means to break that tie. But
I mean, my question comes from sort of observing the various proclamations that have been made throughout the past couple of years. And I just haven't seen any, and it could be that I haven't seen it. It could be my fault that I have not seen sort of the highlighting of the folks with disabilities. And I think that's a massive need and that's something we should absolutely talk about. So I just want to know a little bit more about that. I do think that you should be interested in the cause to do it. And so if there is a discussion around that, that's definitely something I would be interested in, but I'd like to learn a little bit more. If that makes sense.
no, it makes sense. And I can certainly see what I can do to provide that additional information and bring it back to the commission.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Do we have any questions for staff on current planning projects? Okay, hearing none. Staff communications?
Just a couple of items. We are still moving forward with our climate action plan. Our survey period is still open, so those who have not participated can certainly participate. But as far as near-term items, I don't know if we have anything. We're kind of in the data collection, data gathering stage. So, but I just wanted to make note that our survey is still open.
Thank you. All right, commissioner announcements. Do we have any reports from the commissioners on meetings or conferences attended at the city expense? So Commissioner Vavrick, I and Commissioner Weber attended the League of California Cities Planning Commissioners Conference. It was a very good educational time. I did ask Commissioner Weber and Vavrick if they'd say a little bit something about what we learned.
I'd be happy to start. So this was my first conference of this type. I found it very interesting. It was great to meet with commissioners throughout the state. Being relatively new to the commission, I learned a term that I had never heard before, which is builder's remedy. And I was surprised to find that there are cities in the state that have multiple applications for builder's remedy projects because they have not met the state's requirement for having their housing element completed in a timely manner. And so they're dealing with many builders remedy projects. And by the way, the definition, well, it comes from the Housing Accountability Act. And if a locality has not adopted a housing element in substantial compliance with state law, developers may propose eligible housing development projects that do not comply with either the zoning or the general plan for the locality, city or state, or city or county. So it's quite, I just want to acknowledge staff for the city of Pleasant Hill for getting the job done, getting it done appropriately and timely so that we're not dealing with that, because I was very surprised to see that that is a huge issue for some of our fellow commissioners in the state.
That's true. Do you have anything?
I think what I'm going to talk about is what didn't happen there, which is that what did happen there was an incredible amount of good information on housing law, conducting public hearings. All of that happened, but in marked contrast to a few years ago, it's been a while since I went there. There was virtually no discussion of commercial development.
Mhm.
How all of this housing is going to be supported was not discussed at all. So I will say that it was an excellent conference in terms of updating us on the law, updating us on some of the housing issues that are probably coming down from Sacramento. But, you know, as to how it's going to be supported, there was absolutely nothing. So it's an interesting time that we're living in, but, you know, it's pretty clear where the focus is, and it seems to be pretty much Sacramento driven, quite frankly. And everybody was clear about that. It was great to be in a room full of people who are under no illusions about what's going on in our state.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, it was a good time. I walked away with this wonderful bookmark that has a long list of CEQA acronyms. And I thought that it would be really fun to play a game of Stump the Planner, but we're getting late, so we won't do that tonight.
Thank you.
With that, any announcements and comments from the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. It is 8:30 PM and we are adjourned.